Good day, everyone. It's Alan Schimmel, DevOps.com, and welcome to another DevOps.com webinar. I think you're going to really enjoy what we've lined up today. Our friends at TaskTop are sponsoring and are bringing us a real kind of peek into real life customer insights, 11 IT tool integration patterns to speedy delivery. Here at DevOps.com, we literally do hundreds of webinars all around DevOps, obviously. And what we have found from feedback from our audience is that people want to understand and recognize patterns. They want to see patterns that resemble their own situations and how others are dealing with it. So this type of webinar where we're going to look at patterns and tool integration patterns, you may see many, your own organization here, or maybe you get some ideas on what to do in your organization. But we think it's going to be a really special webinar. So thanks for joining. Before I turn it over to our TaskTop friends, I want to quickly go over some ground rules. We have time for questions. We've set aside time for questions at the end of today's webinar. If you look at your GoToWebinar control panel, you'll see a little section marked questions. If you click the arrow or caret, so it's pointing downwards, it'll expand, and you can see that you can type your question in there. We encourage you, insist even, type your question in real time. Don't wait to put your question in when we say, okay, now it's time for questions. By then, there may be literally dozens of questions in ahead of yours. You may forget what your question was in the beginning of the webinar. Don't fall into that trap. Type your question in real time. It's queued, it's there, we can line it up, and we'll do our best to get it answered by our panel. If we have so many questions we can't get to them all, the other nice thing about putting them in here is we do have a record of them. We could try maybe off panel, off webinar to get you an answer to make sure you get the information you need. So please type your questions in real time. Don't wait till the end. If you have a technical issue, maybe the slides are not progressing, our audio is bad, it's choppy, something's going on, we do have folks standing by to help you. If you use the chat section at the bottom of our webinar panel, control panel, you could just type in there what the issue is, and someone will reach out to you and try to help. Usually we can kind of fix whatever you need, whatever the problem is. Let me also say that this webinar is being recorded. The slides and the webinar will be available on DevOps.com, or maybe more correctly, DevOps TV, our YouTube channel, where all of our webinars are, almost all of our webinars are. If you want to go back and look at some pre-recorded ones, it's a great way to do it. Lastly, we are going to be doing some polling questions today. It's one of my favorite features of the webinar because we get a chance to see what you, the audience, are really thinking about or, focusing in on. But polling questions, like so much else, it's only as good as what others do with it. If we only get 20% of you who answer the polls, that's not really indicative of the audience. So please, they're short, multiple choice kinds of questions. Take a moment, answer them when we ask them. It'll make everyone's experience at the webinar a lot better. Okay, with that said, let's turn now into our webinar. As I said, sponsored by TaskTop, Customer Insights, 11 IT tool integration patterns to speed delivery. Joining us today are Chandler Clements, product analyst at TaskTop. Chandler, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Alan.
Fantastic. And steering the ship, Nicole Bryan, Vice President Product at TaskTop. Nicole, welcome.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you here. Guys, if it's okay, I'd like to hand over things to you. Before we do, I do want to introduce one other important person to our group, and that is Sarah, who will be helping with questions later on. So, Sarah, thanks for joining. Nicole, take it away.
Fabulous. Thanks. Yeah, we're super excited to be here. And kind of as you said, obviously as a product person, I do lots of webinars and demos and often about what the product does. But this is super exciting because this is about research that we've done in the last years, and about really connecting and helping articulate what customers are doing today in the world of integration around software delivery and value streams. So super excited to be talking about this today. Just a quick agenda. I'm going to run through an introduction to the research that we're going to be presenting. Then I'm going to hand it over to Chandler to talk through these 11 integration patterns. And then we thought it would be helpful to also show 5 customer use cases of how they've specifically used the integration patterns for their organization, the challenges they faced, and how the integration patterns helped them. So with that, I will get going. So, this audience, it clearly knows how complex it is to build software, right? Sure, at a high level, ideate, create, release, and operate. And really, in the last years, we're also trying to be much more customer-centric around that. But while this may seem, kind of pretty and simple, y'all on this call certainly understand that behind that, it really translates to a large number of activities that are going on in order to create or ideate or release. And all of those activities are actually accomplished by a large variety of tools performed by various roles in order to actually execute on those activities. And so what you find is that your success at building software has direct dependencies on your tool landscape and how well the tool landscape operates. Another way of thinking about it is how would you fill in this diagram at your organization? How would you fill in that diagram? What tools would you put there? And what flows of information would you put? Well, that's what TaskTop has been asking for over 5 years. And that's what we're here to talk to you about today. And so here is a subset of what we call our software delivery value stream library. Try saying that fast 10 times in a row. It's not very easy to do. But it's been a very interesting road as we endeavored to really dig into these diagrams. Chandler actually spent, I don't know, a ton of hours on this project. So we've learned quite a bit. So it was 300 different enterprises, over 1,000 different integrations, and we're super excited to share what we've learned. But of course, we're not going to quite share what we've learned yet. We actually want to ask y'all some questions and do a little bit more context setting before we do the big reveal. So here's our first poll, and take a look at the right, and would love to get a sense, in your organization, how many different tools do you have in each of those clusters? And I'll give everybody a little bit of time to answer, but how many tools in ideate, create, release, and operate do you have?
Yep. And guys, as I mentioned, this really helps. It helps everyone. It helps the presenters as well as the rest of attendees. If we get a flavor for, you guys are in the real world. What are you doing? So let's close this one off in 5. Come on, give us a couple more votes here. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, survey says. Whoop, here we are.
Survey says. Yeah, and so this is exactly what I would have expected, in the sense that, the reality is there are just a lot of tools required in order to successfully build software. And we've actually seen it grow over the years, not shrink. Yeah, so 52% have at least between 2 and 4 tools. Almost no one has less than 2. Wow, 13% have greater than 8. So following on to that, if we could put up the second poll, whether or not y'all think that number will be going up, down, or remain the same in the coming 2 to 3 years.
Okay, same rules apply, guys. If you can vote quickly, we'll move along. We have a lot to cover. So again, I'm going to ask if you can get all your votes in here. We'll close it off in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Votes in. Poll shows.
This is fun. I haven't done the poll thing before. It's very fun.
Yep.
Okay, so 56% think that number is going to be going up. And I think I would love it if I could be in front of everyone and ask all the reasons why. I would love to get those reasons. Obviously, I can't do that on a webinar, but I find it super interesting that people feel that number is going to go up. So given that, I want to walk through I want to pose one more notion, if I can get my screen to work again. Hold on. So I want to pose one more thought, and that is that lots of attention in the DevOps space is kind of focused on the code commit to release, in the CI/CD space. And in CI/CD space, you actually can almost remove the human element and automate a tremendous amount. But what about everything up above? And what you'll see in the patterns that we've discovered, it really shows the importance of the equal value and focus on both the kind of ideate and create quadrants, as well as the release. And so the kind of spoiler alert to what Chandler is going to walk you through is that true end-to-end matters, and it's about much more than that only the CI/CD and release delivery pipeline. Of course, that part is super important as well. But I think you'll see in these coming integration patterns the value and importance of the ideate and create and operate pieces as well. So with that, I am going to pass over to Chandler to walk through the results of our research. Chandler, over to you.
All right, cool. Yeah, thanks, Nicole. I'm excited to talk about some of the findings we had from analyzing a group of companies, and it was just a great opportunity to be able to see how the landscape's kind of changed, what tools these companies are using, and what they're interested in doing with these tools. Just a quick point, 5 years ago, it was a lot different than it is now. And we're going to see how that's kind of evolved over time. So this slide shows a breakdown of the different companies that we were able to survey. The industries here, you can see financial services and healthcare are at the top. These are highly regulated industries, and we're going to see a theme as we look through the next set of slides that kind of looks at this theme more in depth. And then these are all large enterprises. That's important to note as well. And one thing I want to point on is that automotive is the smallest section here, but we're seeing a trend of them wanting to be more connected with their value stream and wanting to get deeper into software for building their cars. This slide shows the popular endpoints we found when looking at all these companies and the tools they use. You'll see on the left side here that there's Micro Focus, HPE, ALM. I don't think anybody is surprised here, and this is due to a lot of these companies being large enterprises. And the left side, you'll see TFS, you'll see IBM Doors NextGen, and then the right side, you'll see Jira, ServiceNow, Jama. The reason we split up like this is because you can see on the left side, these are the more established tools. These tools have been around for a long time, and companies have been using them. While the right side is more of the new up-and-comers, they're more fit to the Agile methodology. And we want to show side by side because large enterprises aren't really focusing on one side or the other. They're connecting between these old or more established tools.
Chandler's looking at me because I'm like twice his age, old like you versus, established.
These established tools that have been around for a long time with these newer tools that are trying to do different things. This slide just shows the most popular artifact types, with the top row being the stories, epics, defects, requirements, features, and the ones below are a little less common, but we did see them repeatedly after looking at all these companies.
I want to jump in here, Chandler, and point out again that top row, which are most popular, stories, epics, test cases, requirements, features, those are all, again, in the ideate and create phases. The stuff above, kind of in that picture I showed above the CI/CD part of the world.
All right, cool. And just one thing I want to add before moving on to the next slide is that vulnerabilities is at the bottom here, but we're starting to see an increased interest in including security in the overall value stream. So I expect to see vulnerabilities being more common over time.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Very interesting.
And as Nicole touched on earlier, true product value streams really require end-to-end integration. And these data points here really just prove that companies are starting to think in more of a value stream and wanting to connect the different pieces instead of working in just one section. So 70% enterprises integrated 3+ tools, while 40% were 4+ tools, and then 10% had 6 or more tools in their value stream.
And that's substantiated by the polling we just did, and that it's probably going to keep going up.
Mm-hmm. All right, so while looking at all these companies, there was a lot of similarities we found, and they all tended to emerge in the specific integration patterns that these companies were interested in. So there's 11 primary patterns that we kept seeing repeated, and we're going to talk a little deeper on these, but just wanted to note that these are not the only integration patterns. We are discovering new ones all the time, and we can expect to see more primary patterns evolve as these become more common with different companies. We've seen this tool landscape already, but for the next set of slides, we're going to split this out and show an integration pattern framework to better describe and represent how these tools and areas can be connected together. And one quick point is that 66% of companies have had interest in 4 to 8 integration patterns, which if you look 5 years ago, it was just one integration pattern that they were focusing on. So you can see that their sophistication is being realized for the value stream, and that they realize they need to adapt to the complexity over time.
Okay, now we're going to jump in, right?
Yep.
We're going to go through the 11.
Yeah,
Hold your horses, everybody.
So this first one is the most common, the most interesting or interested integration pattern that these companies saw value in. And this was also 5 years ago. This is the one that we saw all the time. So no surprise here. With this pattern, this involves developers and testers in trying to create alignment between these two different teams who are using two different tools. The testing and QA team has their test management tools such as Micro Focus or HPE QC, while on the other side, developers are in their Agile planning tools such as Jira. And testers need to see these defects and the status on these to know when to test and when to retest these defects. So if you were to connect these tools, you can see here, you can just mirror those defects over into the test management tool, and the testers have visibility to the actual defects for them to test against. So this next slide shows a PMO to Agile kind of flow, and 50% of companies had an interest and saw some value in this integration pattern. This involves, a PMO office or a PMO project management office has their own PPM tools such as CAPPM, where they have their high-level portfolio items. So they have these initiatives and investments over here, but the development teams are actually executing on these initiatives. If you were to connect these tools as shown in this scenario, you can break down those high-level initiatives into actionable work items, and developers can work with these epics and stories and tasks and have a way to really tie the development to the customers and the true business value. And this slide shows requirements traceability, which is more of a combination of a bunch of the other integration patterns we're going to take a look at. And this, I said earlier, there's going to be a theme of these highly regulated and industries that need to have compliance. And this is going to be very important for those companies, as it's really necessary to have a sophisticated and traceable set of requirements to meet compliance needs.
Yeah, I found this to be super interesting I think people underestimate how much requirements management tools are still very much needed and used. I found this one to be maybe a little bit surprising in our research.
So this next set of slides is going to be related to specifically help desk or service desk tools. So the first one in this group is related to incident escalation. So whenever the support team or help desk team receives customer inquiries or has incidents reported by the customers, they can take a look at these and determine if they're high priority. And if they're high priority, they'll need to escalate this to the development team, but they're in another tool. So if there's a disconnect and slow feedback, if they don't have these flowed and connected in some way. So if you were to flow, let's say, ServiceNow incident over to Jira for the developers to take a look at, they can see that it's been escalated, it is high priority, and they need to work on it quickly. And they can also flow back the status of this incident and let the support team have a way to inform the customer of the status of fixing their problem. So we're going to stop again here because we have another survey question for you all to take a look at.
Okay, so help desk incident escalation. How is this your integration? How is this integration accomplished today in your organization? Please select one of the following. A couple comments from the audience said we weren't giving you enough time to vote, and I apologize. So we'll go slow. It's hard for me to go slow, but we'll go slow. But please, guys, take your time here, but do vote. And you can see the options are not needed. It's needed but manual. It's needed on a point-to-point integration basis, or it's an external integration software. And really, I appreciate everyone voting. Maybe going slow is the way. Slower is better. There's a lesson there to be learned. All right, let's close voting off, though, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, survey shows. What do you think, guys?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So I guess, honestly, I would have been surprised if anyone, if more than 5% of people said it was not needed. I think it's equally interesting that still 40% of y'all are having to deal with this on a manual basis. And we'll talk about a use case later on, but that's just, that is really unfortunate in terms of the productivity wasted on that. I am glad to see that a good chunk of y'all have some way of integrating either point-to-point or with external integration software. So yeah, super interesting. Get back to my slides. Hold on.
All right, cool. Thanks everybody for the responses. So next couple of slides are more help desk integration patterns. This one specifically relating to feature requests. So instead of the support team receiving a problem, they actually receive a request for new functionality within a product. And this is also something that will need to be worked on by the development team, but they use their own Agile planning tool to be able to accomplish and implement this work. So if you were to connect these tools together, you'd flow over these feature requests and break them down into epics, stories, whatever actionable work items are needed. And the development team can work on these and implement these features while, again, reporting status back to the support team to let the customer know the status of getting this feature implemented. And the final help desk pattern is related to known defects. This is when a development team has, a known set of problems. They can't always have every defect fixed for each version of the release of the product releases. So they have an idea of what problems already exist, but their tool's disconnected from the support team, who is actually interacting with the customers and is finding out about problems, but don't know if these have been addressed or not. So if you flow over these defects into a service desk tool, you'll have a full library that the support team can reference and be able to see this. If any of these have been tracked already, if they're being worked on currently, and have a quicker feedback loop to tell a customer, hey, we've already seen this, and this is being worked on currently and should be fixed soon. And the next grouping of slides is going to be more related to requirements and requirements management. This first one, as I said earlier, PMO will have their own tool where they track these high-level portfolio items, but these can also relate to requirements to a development team. So this is simply flowing those high-level initiatives and breaking them down into requirements for the business analyst or product managers to be able to identify what needs to be accomplished to meet these high-level initiatives. This next one is requirements connecting with the developers to have some visibility and traceability between these requirements and the actual work items to implement the requirements. So over in the requirements management tool, such as JAMA or IBM Doors Next Gen, you'll have these set of requirements that need to be visible to the development team. And in this scenario, you can flow over the requirements and break them down into work items such as epics, stories, tasks, and the development team can take a look and implement these to make sure they're meeting all the requirements needs. And again, we're going to stop here for another survey question.
Okay. I'm going to read this one, save the coughing. Requirements management, agile planning. How is this integration accomplished today in your organization? And again, select one of the following. Not needed, needed manual, needed point-to-point integration, external integration software. So again, not rushing anyone. We'll give you a chance to read the questions here and think about it.
Very intrigued. I'm very intrigued with what comes back on this one, actually.
All right. Well, we're going to close voting off here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Survey says, what do you think, guys and ladies?
Wow. This one is surprising to me. I guess I thought there would be more of the not needed because there's certainly this perception that requirements management is less of a thing and less needed now with Agile and DevOps. So the rest of it doesn't surprise me. Again, it looks like a good chunk of people have some solution, at least point to point. But again, it does seem, and God help the people that are doing this manually, because that's unbelievably challenging. Again, if I were with y'all, I would be asking, how in the world do you do this manually? Yeah, very interesting. Thanks for that. Get my slides back.
All right, one more requirements related pattern. In this scenario, this is aligning requirements with test management tools so that the testers and QA team can have a good plan that's able to meet all the requirements and test against those and make sure a feature is 100% complete before signing off.
That's a pretty common one as well. That's very, very needed in the industry.
Mm-hmm. The next set of slides are a little different from the other integration patterns, with this first one being a way to connect between boundaries that are separate companies. So like in the automotive industry, or when a company needs to outsource to have code completed for a product, there'll be a supplier on one side and manufacturer on another. The supplier can receive work from the manufacturer when connecting the tools and then be able to report back on what they've completed to the manufacturer.
So this one we wanted to do I think, is this our last poll?
Yep.
I think this is our last poll. We were just interested to see how many organizations, we see this quite a bit in automotive, but I'm interested to see if it's a larger set of need.
Okay. So supply chain integration, how is this integration accomplished today in your organization? Same kinds of answers, guys. So hopefully by this time you're kind of used to it. But again, not rushing anyone. Give you a chance to vote, but please help us. And little bit slower on the uptake here. I guess people are kind of thinking about it. And supply chain integration. Supply chain integration is always complicated.
It is. It
Yes.
is.
Oh man, that brings me back. Anyway, we'll close voting here off in another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, survey shows. Wow, got a lot of not needed here. Is this more in line with what you thought?
Yeah, it is. Although honestly, what is that? That's almost 45, 46% that need it and are doing it manually or with point-to-point software, and only 10%. I suspect if I were able to ask people that part of the reason why it's manual or point-to-point is because of the large amount of security requirements and needs when you're sharing information externally. But of course, I can't ask that part of the question. So anyway, great. Okay, back to our slides. Maybe.
All right, so let's finish up on these patterns. This last one here isn't about actually connecting tools together. It's taking all the data you have in the individual tools and flowing all that into the database to have one true source to have all your value stream related data. All right, so yeah, that's all of the 11 primary integration patterns that we've seen. You saw the similarities in the patterns, but we're going to look at some of the success stories to see some of the differences that different companies can have. So Nicole, I'll pass it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Chandler. Hopefully, people should take a screenshot of this, or I guess we're going to send out this anyway, because I think this is super helpful to have this kind of this one slide of all the integration patterns. So yeah, so now I'm going to go through 5 use cases, customer success stories. Again, just to set the stage, all of the companies involved are large organizations, enterprise organizations, as Chandler already talked about before, often with significant regulatory and compliance requirements as well. What's interesting is that throughout, we find that there's basically 4 primary drivers and challenges that organizations face that make them come and have this recognition. Wait a second, I've got to have an automated end-to-end value stream. They are poor visibility, and that involves, obviously, if you don't have automated flow end-to-end, it makes it very difficult to see what's happening and then be able to improve it. The traceability requirements, which of course also came out in the patterns, that ability to trace is extremely important for safety critical software, of which there's just a tremendous amount in the world. The third one is kind of, I don't know, the unsung, I guess you wouldn't call it a hero because it's not good to not be productive. But, and y'all's answers to the survey questions were completely supportive of this. Degraded productivity because all of that manual work, what was it? 20-30% were, or 40% of people were doing some of these patterns manually. That's a lot of loss of productivity. And then last, disruptions, natural disruptions due to acquisitions, mergers, and reorganizations, and the need to be able to you just can't, you acquire a company, you can't say, and now please throw away all of your tools instantly. You want to integrate them into your value stream at your organization. So the first company I'm going to talk about is an automotive technology company. They, as we've now alluded to quite a number of times, have significant traceability needs for compliance, highly regulated industry. They found that there's a significant disconnect between the BAs and developers. And what's interesting is that they desperately wanted to be modern and do agile development practices, but they were literally burdened, and I think that word is the perfect word, burdened by the reality of requirements, traceability, and compliance. So they came to us, and they are flowing information from doors, requirements from doors to Jira, and they're also using Serena Business Manager to a certain extent to help manage change requests for releases. So they're using a combination of three different patterns. They found in terms of benefits that they had enhanced team collaboration between business analysts and developers. And interestingly, because they have this automated traceability, they're able to achieve a higher level of certification as an organization. Next up, a Fortune 100 financial services company. They were undergoing a very large IT transformation, but were saddled with poor visibility because their reality is they had multiple best-of-breed tools within teams with a lot of manual duplicate entry across systems. And so they are using, let's see, 6 different integration patterns flowing requirements and defects between HP, RTC, and Doors Next Gen. And then also modernizing and beginning to use more Jira, but needing to have Jira still integrated in with their testing environment, which is HP ALM or Micro Focus ALM. They also have ServiceNow, where they're using the help desk and Serena Business Manager help with releases. So they have some interesting quotes in terms of the benefits they saw. We allowed developers to focus directly on the tool they utilize in their day-to-day activity and can now better foster communication with others outside of development. This one is super interesting to me. They've increased their test coverage because they would increase transparency and awareness of post-production issues because they're automatically flowing trouble tickets and problems back into the development cycle. They've also benefited from being able to visualize requirements traceability and have better tracking of defects logged against their requirements. Next up is a large retail company. Another common theme, oftentimes the driving initiative is some type of large Agile DevOps or IT transformation. This organization was doing an Agile transformation. They were distributed across multiple geographies with different tool stacks, and they did not want to consolidate them. Again, this is to acquisitions and allowing people to work the way they want to work. They had a large number of custom point-to-point in-house integrations, which required tremendous maintenance, and they were also looking for more consistency, but while maintaining autonomy of their 40-plus IT departments. And as you can see here, again, they've got different tool stacks. So they're letting some teams use version 1, other teams are using Jira. They're all tied in to CA Clarity, and then a more consolidated approach to testing with HP. And again, bringing in the trouble tickets, as well as then the blue lines, you can see they're feeding all of the information out using consolidated reporting to get consistency of reporting. They've eliminated over 100 hours of manual work per month. They have much more confidence in their data integrity and accuracy. And interestingly, we didn't chat about this much in this webinar, but they feel that having this end-to-end integration approach for their value stream allows them to kind of future-proof their integration infrastructure because they wanted teams to be able to try a different tool, see if it works, but not have a tremendous investment to keep it integrated with the rest of their value stream.
And I just want to add in here, if you see on the right side, we have a list of integration patterns, and we've bolded a few of those. Those are actually ones that they had evolved with over time because they started with the initial set and evolved over time. So that kind of puts that point of future-proofing integration structure.
Yeah, to your point, we have very few customers, in fact, none, I would argue none, that start with 7 integration patterns. They start with 1 or 2, and then they grow into it. It's a great point. Next up, a pharmaceutical company. And as y'all can imagine, they have tremendous compliance requirements from the FDA. And so they needed to really focus on traceability requirements. And they talk a lot about the fact that they simply cannot find a single tool to use across different domain areas. And they also have a significant aspect of their growth is driven by acquisitions, and they have to be able to accommodate having a consistent end-to-end value stream, but allow for different tools to be part of that as acquisitions occur. So here's what their integration landscape looks like, and you can see over on the right where they kind of they have multiple TFSs because they've acquired some of them, and they're trying to consistently use Rally in-house, but they still have parts of the organization using using Jira, and of course, HP ALM as well. The quote down on the left, our business units are unable to use a single tool across the different domains. This way having a broader integration strategy can meet the business needs and keep people in their tool of choice. And then again, as I've mentioned, the ability to onboard acquisitions, which is a little bit related to future-proofing your integration infrastructure is important as well. Next up is an insurance company, they also were undergoing an IT transformation, and they felt that they had a lack of visibility into cycle times and productivity. This organization is very advanced in their value stream thinking, and really focus a lot of energy on being able to have automated true end-to-end flow so that they can measure cycle times and productivity and improve it. And then they, like pretty much everyone, also have degraded productivity because of silos between different functional areas. So their integration landscape, again, as Chandler pointed out, they did not start with all of these integrations. I believe they started just with RTC and ALM, but I could be wrong. But you can see they have brought in requirements management with Doors Next Gen. They're using HP ALM. Their requests originate in CA Clarity. And then again, the blue lines indicate that they're feeding all of this information out to a consolidated database so that they can have consistent reporting. Interesting, the results that they saw in their organization was because they had a connected value stream, they saw a 22% improvement in their Net Promoter Score. So fundamentally, people are happier when they're not bogged down by inefficient practices or forced to use tools that they don't want to use. I'll read the quote, the automation via task top reduces manual interactions, status meetings, and the email deluge that were slowing us down. It also helped create trust in our data and confidence in our delivery. And again, they're using the consolidated database to then be able to measure lead times and search for bottlenecks and areas for improvement. So that's the five use cases. I just want to summarize that, and I think there's clearly some themes throughout this presentation. The primary benefits of a connected value stream are really around creating a traceable record, but in an automated fashion, maximizing productivity, eliminating disruption, and that all of those things really end up providing the ability to have more agility and ability to experiment and have tight feedback loops throughout the organization. So the three takeaways, think value stream, true end-to-end. Don't forget, it's a four quadrant circle, which doesn't make sense. Circles don't have quadrants, but y'all know what I mean. Think true end-to-end, not just the CI/CD delivery pipeline. And these value streams require end-to-end integration across tools. But rather than that being overwhelming and a little bit scary, hopefully this research we've done helps you to see that there are common patterns that can help you to get to your end goals faster. So with that, I will open it up for questions, and I will actually turn it over to Sarah.
Great, thank you, Nicole and Chandler. As Alan said earlier, you can enter your questions in the questions panel. So if you just make that caret point downward, you'll see the space where you can type in your questions. Some of you already have, thankfully. And so I'll give you a little bit of time to do that as well. I just wanted to show you one more thing as well. So we showed a lot of different diagrams over the course of the webinar. If you were sitting there thinking, well, what would mine look like? You can find out. So if you go to that website right there, and we'll send you the link to this afterwards as well, you can have a chat with one of our engineers here and kind of discuss what your value stream looks like, and we can help you create one of these diagrams as well. So if you wanted to do that, just go ahead and request that. So let me pull up some of these questions. We had one where, Nicole, I know that we don't really play favorites we did have someone ask for the favored or best tool in the ideate phase. Do you maybe want to talk about the most popular ones that we've seen?
Yes, I certainly, I think one thing about favorite is obviously to each his own, and I think in different industries and with different needs, you will see different usefulness in different tools. But in the ideate phase, we see a lot of JAMA, a lot of Doors Next Gen. We sometimes see, actually, interestingly, and this did not come up in the list of most popular endpoints because it's really developing as we speak the notion of true product management tools. And so we do see interest and people using more actual product management tools. Target process is one that we see. Can you think of others? Those would be my go-tos. Good question.
Right, and there's actually, on that same note, there was a question from someone saying there are a lot of tools in my tool chain that I don't see here. They weren't on any of the slides. And
yes.
So I will actually put a link in the chat to the page where you can find all of our integrations.
And just to super relevant point, like this was just our findings of like the top and the most common, but absolutely there are tons of tools that we did not discuss here. And we have 57 different connectors for a reason.
Right,
so,
exactly.
So yeah, I'm sure there were a lot of tools, and we find new ones all the time as well.
Right.
Like, all the time.
Great. So we had a couple of questions around around automation as well. So I think specifically in the more in the CI/CD phase, are we seeing any kind of patterns around that?
Absolutely, yes. In terms of the CID space, one thing that you see in the CI/CD space is the need for what I would call process orchestration, which is a little bit different from what you need in the ideate and create phase. And so you see patterns whereby you're trying to kick off processes and you're trying to, as the word says, orchestrate, coordinate the core automation aspects of builds and releases. That could be an entire webinar on its own, for sure.
Right. We had someone ask if we see clients struggling with application security testing.
Absolutely. Hands down, one of the hardest things. And it's becoming more and more prevalent and important to be doing it. But one of the problems that we see, one of the things that people face is that those tools produce an unbelievable amount of, I don't mean this in a bad way, but of noise, right? Like so for instance, we've had people say, I'm doing security testing and I want all the defects to flow into Jira. And then we usually say, ooh, all? Are you sure? Because it can be thousands, and a lot of them will be false positives, and so it really takes a little bit more thought to identify. You do want to flow the information into whatever you're using for defect management, but with some curation of it to make sure that you're targeting the right, that you've done that, I don't know, first level of triage, actually sometimes 2 or 3 levels of triage before that. But yeah, we see an increased usage of that area in tools for sure.
Mm-hmm. We had one comment/question, I would say, about saying all of these technologies, it seems kind of to bloat the pipeline a little bit. Do you see any organizations that have kind of a small, like just maybe 1 or 2 tools that run a little bit leaner, and what are the challenges there?
Yeah. So interestingly, to be frank, I mean, but obviously I sit in a seat whereby if they've come to TaskTop, we know that they have a large number of tools.
Right.
So there's that part of the answer. But in large organizations, no, I don't ever see organizations that have just one or two tools, because the reality is, there are these specialized roles, and they do require specialized tools. Now, I do see people wanting to kind of try and, I guess I'd say, consolidate and not have, 5 agile planning tools. It seems a little bit of overkill. But the reality is that TFS people, Microsoft people, they want to use TFS, and non-TFS people, non-Microsoft people, they want to use a Rally or a Jira. So no, we don't see a lot of, I only have 2 tools and that's how it's going to stay forever.
Right.
Also because of the legacy factor. We have a lot of customers that are trying to use automation to keep their investment in these tools that they've had for many years valuable.
Great. Let's see. Are there any open source tools included in these integration patterns?
We have a Bugzilla connector, which is open source.
Right.
It's the only one that comes to me off the top of my mind. The other thing, and we didn't talk about this at all in this webinar, but there's a lot of, we have functionality that essentially allows you to have an API gateway to push events to us that often are coming from open source tools into your value stream pipeline. That too, Sarah, would be a whole nother.
Right. So I think I've just heard you commit to a couple more webinars, so I'll hold you to that, Nicole.
Taylor, okay,
yeah, great. Let's see. We have some specific questions around change sets and user stories. I think a lot of these more specific ones we might need to take offline just to get the
questions around that, but that's one of my favorite ones. The whole change set to user story thing is, I find, one of the most fascinating. It's at the core of being able to have full end-to-end traceability, and yet it seems to be one of the least used patterns. Otherwise, I would have been showing it up here, which is really unfortunate, because I strongly urge organizations to use the capabilities to have a change set, to have your change sets automatically linked to the originating story or defect. TaskTop actually can help you do that. But putting that aside, that is a super important thing to do, and most organizations still do not do it. Whoever asked that question, I'm happy to have a longer conversation about that.
Okay, David, there you go. So we have another question from Keith saying that Rational provides traceability internally. Does TaskTop recognize those links for other software like Jira? Or how do we handle that traceability in general?
Yeah, y'all are an inquisitive bunch today. So we have a functionality that we call artifact relationship management. And if you are using a tool or a suite like Rational that has traceability kind of built into it, and you're wanting to flow information from that tool into a tool that's not part of the suite, like flowing into Jira, we can actually maintain and keep those relationships and create them in the other tool. Now, if you're flowing into a tool that fundamentally doesn't support that capability, we obviously can't do that. But we absolutely maintain and mirror the relationships and the traceability from your original tool to whatever tool you're trying to flow to. Did I answer that question, Sarah? Was that the question that was being asked?
I believe so.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. Is it practically possible to limit to a few number of tools which can cater to the need of project/program to manage end-to-end flow? How is it possible to bring simplicity to the space?
Yeah, I do think it's possible. I definitely think it's possible to have, on the order of like 3 to 5 tools in your end-to-end value stream. I do think it is hard simply because of the scale of most of the organizations that we deal with. So maybe I should answer it slightly differently. Within individual value streams, I think definitely you can have a more kind of streamlined 3 to 4 kind of tools involved. Organizations, though, you know, a large scale organization will have hundreds of value streams,
Right.
which, you know, oftentimes will involve different sets of tools as well. But the way to do that is to focus on less on the tools and more on what are the activities, what are the set of activities and phases that you need to go through, and then map onto that what tool is kind of required to execute on that activity. And that's really getting into value stream network management, which is, you know, a whole discipline around you know, value streams and how you model and map to them. Again, another webinar.
Right. Okay, I think we've gone through most of the questions, and I know that we're running a little bit low on time, and I want to make sure that you have time to say any final words that you may have, Alan.
Excuse me, I was on mute. Yes, thank you. So guys, you know, as I expected, this was a spectacular webinar. You know, our audience likes these kinds of, you know, really digging in deep into patterns and stuff like that. I would encourage you all to go check out the link here on your screen. I think it was also put out in the chat window for everyone to see. You can download these integrations yourself so you have them. And also, I mean, playing around with Desktop and seeing, I mean, these are 11. There's a lot of other patterns here to look at as well. So I also want to thank the audience for participating in our polling questions. It really does make a difference, as well as the great questions we got. But most of all, I want to thank Nicole and Chandler for delivering here today. Thank you so much.
It was our pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. It was great to share all this.
I really appreciated all the questions. That makes it way more fun. So
yes, it does. And we have records of them, so we have them out there. Guys, thank you to all for joining us today. We'll call it a wrap at this point. It's Alan Schimmel for DevOps.com. You've just sat in on a great DevOps webinar, and we hope to see you soon at another one. Many thanks to Desktop for sponsoring today. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Bye-bye.